Karen shoved my 70-year-old disabled veteran father off our front porch during a heated argument over his wheelchair ramp. But when I later watched her Lexus slide into the drainage ditch behind our property and disappear into nearly 4 feet of mud, she learned the hard way that putting your hands on my family comes with consequences she could never undo. My name is Anthony, and I'm a heavy equipment operator with Morrison Construction in Shreveport, Louisiana. For the past 18 years, I've made my living running bulldozers, excavators, and front-end loaders on job sites all over the region. I know how to move dirt, redirect water, and use gravity and terrain to permanently change what happens to anything that ends up in the wrong place. What Karen didn't realize when she assaulted my father was that she had just crossed the family of someone who understands exactly how mud, drainage, and poor judgment can combine into a situation there's no easy way out of. I live with my father in a modest home in Cypress Grove, a subdivision built in 2014 on the east side of Shreveport. My father, Robert, is a Vietnam War veteran who served 2 tours in the Army and came home with injuries that worsened as the years went by. At 70 years old, he relies on a wheelchair full-time due to severe arthritis and nerve damage in his legs. I moved back home 3 years ago after my mother passed away, so I could help take care of him. We installed a wheelchair ramp on the front porch so he could get in and out of the house on his own. The ramp is solidly built, fully ADA compliant, and gives my father a sense of dignity and independence despite his limitations. Our HOA exists, but it only handles basic services. For 3 years, we had no problems with anyone. That changed 7 months ago when Karen moved in 4 houses down. She had golden blonde hair, drove a spotless white Lexus GX, and clearly took pride in both. She was always perfectly dressed and carried herself like she was above everyone else on the block. She wasn't on the HOA board, but she made sure everyone knew she had opinions about how the neighborhood should look. Her fixation was what she called property appearance standards. No changes, no additions, no individuality. Everything should look exactly like it did when the builder handed over keys. My father's wheelchair ramp immediately became her obsession. It started with a formal complaint to the HOA claiming the ramp was unsightly and didn't match the neighborhood's architectural style. The HOA shut her down quickly, explaining that accessibility modifications for disabled residents are protected under federal fair housing laws and cannot be prohibited. That should have ended it. But Karen wasn't the type to accept being told no. She began parking her Lexus in front of our house and taking photos of the ramp. She posted rants on the neighborhood Facebook page about unauthorized structures and property modifications that supposedly lowered home values. My father was humiliated. He had served his country, sacrificed his health, and now someone was publicly harassing him over the ramp that allowed him to leave his own home. I confronted Karen one afternoon when I caught her taking photos again. "Karen, stop harassing my father about his wheelchair ramp. It's a legal accessibility modification." She sneered and said, "It's ugly and it doesn't belong in this neighborhood." I told her plainly, "My father is a disabled veteran. That ramp is protected by federal law. You need to leave him alone." She shot back that he should have gotten HOA approval before installing it. I explained again that accessibility modifications are exempt and she'd already been told that. She got into her Lexus and drove off without another word. 2 weeks later, everything escalated. I was at work on a construction site, about 30 minutes from home, when my phone rang around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. My father's voice was shaking. "Anthony, you need to come home." Karen came over. We argued, and she pushed me. I fell off the porch. My blood went cold. I asked if he was hurt and if he called 911. He told me he landed in the grass beside the ramp and was bruised but not broken. A neighbor had seen it happen and helped him back inside. Then he said the words that still make my stomach turn. "She put her hands on my chest and shoved me. I could have been seriously hurt." I told him to call the police immediately and file a report. I told my foreman I had a family emergency and left the site on the spot. I drove home faster than I should have, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. When I pulled up, a Shreveport Police Department patrol car was already parked in front of the house. My father was on the porch in his wheelchair, speaking with Officer Davis. Our neighbor, Mrs. Chun, stood nearby, giving a statement. I rushed up and asked if my dad was okay. He said he was just shaken. Officer Davis asked if I was his son, and I told him yes. Before I could say anything else, Mrs. Chun spoke up and explained what she'd witnessed. She said Karen was screaming at my father about the ramp, followed him onto the porch, grabbed his wheelchair, shook it, and when he told her to let go, she shoved him backward out of the chair and off the porch. Officer Davis wrote everything down, then looked at me and said, "Sir, your father wants to press charges. Based on the witness statement, we'll be arresting Miss Patterson for assault on a vulnerable adult." I asked where Karen was, my voice tight with anger. He said she had already left the scene before they arrived. Arrived? We've issued a warrant, and she will be arrested as soon as we locate her. After Officer Davis left, and I confirmed my father was truly okay, just deep bruises along his back and arms, I sat with him while he rested. He was exhausted, shaken, and I could see the humiliation in his eyes, the quiet hurt of being treated like he didn't matter. Around 5 o'clock, I stepped outside to check the mailbox and noticed Karen's white Lexus sitting in her driveway 4 houses down. She was home, apparently completely unbothered by the fact that she had shoved a disabled veteran off his own porch just hours earlier. Something inside me snapped. I walked back into my garage and stared at the equipment inside. I don't bring work machines home, but I do own a small utility tractor with a front bucket that I use for yard work and maintenance projects. It's nothing compared to the heavy commercial equipment I run on job sites, but it's more than capable of moving a vehicle. Behind our property runs a drainage ditch shared by several homes in the subdivision. It's about 8 feet deep and 4 feet wide, and after Louisiana rainstorms, it fills with standing water and thick, sucking mud. After several days of rain the previous week, it was full. Water pooled on top, mud beneath like wet concrete. Karen's property backed up to the same ditch. Her house sat on a slight slope, with her driveway running alongside it and only about 20 feet of grass between the back of her yard and the ditch's edge. That's when the idea formed. It wasn't rational. It wasn't legal. And in that moment, I didn't care. I waited until 9 that night when it was fully dark. I started the tractor, quiet compared to the machines I normally operate, and drove through the backyards using the easement path property owners are allowed to use for maintenance access. I approached Karen's property from behind. Her Lexus was parked in the driveway about 40 feet from the back of the house. I lined the tractor up behind it, extended the front bucket, and gently made contact with the rear bumper. Then I pushed. Once it started moving, the Lexus rolled easily. I guided it along the side of the house, across the back lawn, and straight toward the drainage ditch. When the front wheels reached the edge, gravity took over. The vehicle tipped forward and slid down the slope, hitting the mud and water with a heavy splash. The front end sank immediately. The rear wheels clung to the slope for a moment, but the mud and weight dragged the entire vehicle down until it rested at a 45-degree angle. The front end fully submerged in nearly 4 feet of muddy water. The white Lexus was now half buried in the ditch, coated in mud and completely immobilized. I backed the tractor away, returned to my garage, and went inside. My heart was pounding, but there was a grim, quiet satisfaction in my chest. The next morning, around 7 a.m., I heard screaming from Karen's yard. I looked out my back window and saw her standing at the edge of her property, staring down at her Lexus, sitting helplessly in the ditch. Shreveport police arrived about 30 minutes later, not for the vehicle, but to execute the arrest warrant. Officer Davis and another officer knocked on Karen's door, and she was taken into custody in her bathrobe. After she was gone, a tow truck was called for the Lexus. I watched from my window as the recovery crew assessed the situation. The vehicle was buried deep in mud, with water inside the engine compartment and cabin. It took 3 hours and a heavy-duty winch to extract it. When they finally loaded it onto the flatbed, it was dripping muddy water from the doors, the front end visibly damaged. The Lexus was totaled, engine ruined, electrical system soaked, structural damage from sitting at that angle. Karen made bail later that day and returned home to find her car gone and tractor tracks leading from her driveway to the ditch. She immediately called the police, claiming her vehicle had been vandalized. A different officer arrived, examined the scene, photographed the tracks, and then came to my door asking if I'd seen or heard anything unusual the night before. I told him no, that I'd been inside with my father all evening. He studied me for a long moment. "You operate heavy equipment for a living, don't you?" I said I did. "And you have a tractor in your garage." I confirmed that too. He nodded slowly. "Miss Patterson claims someone deliberately pushed her vehicle into the ditch," he said. "That seems unlikely. Her property slopes toward the ditch. If the parking brake failed or the vehicle wasn't secured, especially after last week's rain softened the ground, it could have rolled on its own." He wrote that down. "That's possible. We'll continue investigating." He left, and I never heard another word about it. Karen's insurance company ruled the loss environmental, caused by improper parking, and paid out the claim minus her deductible. She never replaced the Lexus. The criminal case moved forward. My father testified, and Mrs. Chun backed up every detail. Karen eventually accepted a plea deal, guilty to assault on a vulnerable adult. She was sentenced to 6 months in parish jail, 2 years of probation, restitution for my father's medical bills and emotional distress, anger management classes, and a strict no-contact order. She served 4 months, was released, listed her house immediately, and moved within 3 months. I heard she went to Texas. My father's wheelchair ramp is still exactly where it belongs. He uses it every day. No one has bothered him since. I never admitted what I did to the Lexus. Officially, it rolled due to environmental conditions. Insurance paid. Case closed. But every time I look at that drainage ditch, I remember my father on the ground, and Karen learning that some actions have consequences that can't be undone.